Welcome to Cheddar. Joining me now for a special afternoon edition are two very special guests, Cory Richard and Adrian Ballinger, fresh off a climb to the top of Mount Everest, guys. The tallest peak in the world, 29,000 feet. You were documenting the whole thing on Snapchat. It was working the whole way, and then you got to the top. What happened?
It's a cosmic joke. We were using Snapchat to document the whole climb, and got right to the top, and pulled out my phone. I had done a snap from about 35 vertical feet lower. Pulled out my phone, and it died. And it was the most tragic, I was like, oh my God, that's my, not my whole purpose.
The worst.
It's all because I wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly. He always carries an extra battery, and I was just like, all right, yeah.
So why did it die? The cold?
Yeah, you're so high. There's 33% atmospheric pressure versus what we have here.
Yeah.
And so that's playing a part, and then the cold, and it's just cold. And you took it out, and that was it.
So we're showing some visuals now. This is your Snapchat account, right? Everest No Filter?
Yeah,
okay,
that's
so
right.
it looks like there you are, Adrian, right? And there you are, Cory.
Yeah, that's right.
So for anyone who wasn't following along.
That's the route.
Oh my gosh. And you did this with no oxygen mask, right?
Yes,
that's right.
That's correct.
So Adrian, how many times have you climbed it?
I've summited 6 times before.
Wow.
But always with supplemental oxygen.
Yeah.
So this was the first time trying without.
So this was a first. Cory, your first time?
This was my first time. It was my second time trying without oxygen, and my first summit. So,
wow.
It was pretty special.
I'm impressed. So what kind of gear did you need to keep with you in order to power the phone and get a Wi-Fi signal and make sure that it was always charged?
Well, we have all sorts of extra accoutrement that we carry with us, but it's really about 14 pounds of a satellite terminal, an extra battery, and solar power. And that's it.
Yep.
Is that heavy?
Yeah, there actually isn't a lot of cell phone technology there. There is cell service in the base camp now. We're even able to pick it up occasionally, but mostly satellite.
So did you have to meet with someone, I don't know if you're carrying iPhones or whatever you were carrying, but did you have to meet with a technology expert beforehand so they could help you formulate a plan?
No, basically, expedition satellite communications has been around for almost, 15 years now. It's just, it has gotten cheaper, and it's gotten lighter, and it's gotten better and faster, and certainly that will be the continuing trend.
Even 2 years ago, there's no way we could have.
So why did you decide to go with Snapchat versus any other platform like an Instagram, like a Facebook, anything else?
Both of us have documented expeditions for years using things like Instagram and Facebook and blogs. But really what we found with all of those platforms is it's very easy to not tell the full story. You might post one photo a day, you might have curated it, edited it. The beauty of Snapchat is it's authentic and unfiltered. You have to post right away what you see, and we just really liked that form of storytelling.
It's definitely more of a raw, even to the point of our handle, unfiltered look at what's happening. And these big expeditions, they take months, right? Months.
Right.
And most people think it's just the 4 days at the end.
Right.
And that's not true. So with Snapchat, you have this very unfiltered look at the day in, the day out. How do you go to the bathroom? What is that all like? What
was
does
that
that all
on
look
Snapchat?
like?
I didn't see that one.
That actually was on Snapchat.
Interesting.
Rewatch
No
them.
filter.
No filter, right?
Unintended, yes.
And the boredom and the monotony, but also the excitement and the storms and things. So it really gives you a much more holistic view, and only Snapchat as a platform can actually provide that.
And so did you ever think when you were climbing that you just wanted to savor it in the moment and maybe just put technology down, or were you okay with having it along?
You know what? It's funny that I love that question, because I think there's this idea that technology by default distracts from an experience, and that can be true. But it isn't necessarily, they're not, directly tied. Just because you're using Snapchat doesn't mean you're absorbing the experience. That's still happening around you. And so long as you're aware of that and cognizant of that, it's not hard to sit back and take it in.
And we're both lucky enough. We spend a lot of time outside and a lot of time in the mountains. Probably 7 months a year I'm on expeditions. So it isn't like we're trying to escape the day-to-day world when we go into the wilderness.
And as users of Snapchat, I know, Adrian, you were even snapping before we started to go live here. Are there any critiques or any improvements maybe that could be made to the product? Of course, we always ask this in these tech companies. are always trying to improve their product. So as someone who used it on the climb, is there anything you would say to maybe improve the product?
You know, it didn't happen often, but every now and then Snapchat would shut down and you'd lose everything from a day, because we would take our snaps through the day and then post them in the afternoon when we had our satellite internet technology. And so anytime we lost them, it was like devastating.
Yeah.
So,
that was kind of a sad moment when you're like, oh, how are the snaps? Oh, we lost them all.
Oh, yeah, I know. I
Yeah.
know, and they disappear, obviously, so you can only
They're
see
gone.
them for a certain amount of time
Yeah.
anyway. You hear the closing bell right behind us. Right now, 9 seconds away from 4 o'clock. Obviously, the closing bell down here on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and it looks like the major averages are going to end about flat today. Earlier in our live show, they were down fractionally, so looks like a green day on Wall Street. But continue what you were saying about the snap stories and how you were so bummed sometimes when they disappeared.
Well, I mean, you put a lot of work into this and you want to bring people along. And I think when you lose that, it's kind of like, I mean, I work as a photographer for National Geographic, and I've lost whole days of images. And that's just part of technology. I mean, that, you no longer have a slide anymore. And you can imagine sort of the disappointment of losing a slide or losing an image. It's the same thing with Snapchat. If you lose it, it's like, oh man, that was a good one.
A bummer.
Yeah.
And as experienced climbers, is there any way that you made any money off of this excursion? I know that you both are in these very nice Eddie Bauer zip-ups. Is that just a coincidence here?
That is not a coincidence. No, we are very, very fortunate to be sponsored by Eddie Bauer. They're our, primary support, and not only do they support us financially for trips like this, but the gear they make. I mean, they're almost 100 years old. So and they've actually been outfitting these expeditions since they started happening back in the 50s, which is a really cool sort of creation story. And I think that's, we're very, very fortunate to have that backing. We couldn't do this without them. So
yeah, so Eddie Bauer combined with our other sponsors, Soylent and Strava, they make this possible for us to go climbing.
Yep.
Whether we make a living doing it, I guess we'll see.
You'll see. All right, so were you consuming any Soylent on the trip?
Yes, Soylent ended up being a huge part of our food system.
Really?
Losing weight from me and being cold is a really huge challenge in the mountains. So we had been looking for food, other alternatives beyond the food we can cook ourselves. And Soylent is this full meal replacement, maybe you know it from here, and it definitely helped us both taking calories in, especially up high.
So was that your only diet? Was that the only thing you were consuming?
No. We were eating other things as well. I mean, it's just that when you can't take down like whole foods or
when you can't
solid
digest
foods,
them, right?
yeah, it's
them.
really
Soylent's
easy to just
easier.
drink.
Yeah.
So, but the other cool one that we were using, and another sponsor is Strava, which is another tech.
Yes.
Like it's an app that actually tracks your physical activity.
Yep.
So it's kind of like
Heartbeats, right?
Yeah.
Miles walked, I guess.
Yep.
it's like this storytelling app for athletes, which is an interesting idea. Why do we need to tell stories as athletes in a social sphere? But I think it's
competition.
Yeah. Who's better?
Kind of like a diary, a log, right?
Yeah.
It is. It's a physical log that tells you, what you've done, and they created actual maps for us on the north side of Everest, specific to our trip. And now, because of that, other people can, use that app and actually track their times, moving between camps, and it's
Compare,
it's kind of
maybe?
fun. Yeah,
Yep.
compare.
So what type of training does it take to go into this?
I think a big part is actually the experience that you build over years of climbing. So, one thing that I've been on Everest a number of different seasons now, and it's just so important that you go there with a lot of experience. So that's one piece, and then of course the other side is the actual physical training. I worked skiing down them to build my base.
Yeah, I mean, I worked a little bit differently for this. I took time basically from January on to train with a coach named Steve House, who's a very, very talented alpinist, and he's moved into now physical training, and he and his partner Scott Johnson design a training program. So I would be training 6 days a week, 2 to 8 hours a day. And that would be,
a full-time job. And I'm sure
Yeah.
technology to some extent probably was baked into that experience as well, right? To monitor your heart rate and make sure that everything's
Absolutely.
okay and that you're fully prepared for the trek itself.
It's one of the real changes I think we're seeing is that climbing these big mountains is becoming more data driven. We use coaches. it always used to just be go up there and suffer and hopefully it works out. And now there is a lot more tech coming in behind it.
So are you getting advice from a coach who's looking at your data in real time on the trip, or is there sort of like a post-mortem at the end? You plug it in and then you go over all the data
Cory,
together?
real time on the trip.
Real time on the trip. Steve was constantly looking at my numbers. I'd upload them via the Sunto app, moves count, and that he could then look at that on Training Peaks. And then, these are just different apps that actually all fed into Strava, right? But he was using Training Peaks to look at the detailed scientific numbers.
And talk to us about what the conditions were like throughout, if you two were ever nervous at all, because unfortunately we have seen some deaths tied to climbers trying to make it to the peak of Mount Everest recently.
Yeah, I think overall this season on Everest was an interesting one. It was never a terrible season, no big storms, no big accidents, but there were a lot of marginal conditions through the season that made decision making really challenging. So there was a lot of frostbite on the mountain, there were some deaths. And for us, certainly, it was really challenging to actually pick which day we wanted to try to go to the summit with the weather forecasting to try to get it right. Ultimately, we had quite a bit of wind on our summit day.
Wow.
And doing it without oxygen brings up those odds of having something go wrong really, really high. So you have to choose that day very, very carefully, and sometimes it works in your favor and sometimes it doesn't.
And obviously, if anyone's climbing Mount Everest, they've probably done other climbs as well, but any advice to anyone trying it for the first time?
For me, definitely to take your time, to go through building experience on smaller peaks before ending up on Everest. It is the tallest mountain in the world, it is very serious, and when things go wrong, they go really, really wrong.
Really, really quickly. I mean, my advice to people, because we did get a lot of two-way conversation on Snapchat, how do I do this? I want to do this next year, I want to do this. And again, it's take your time, build up to it. You don't need to rush into Everest. That's not something, I've been climbing for 30 years, so is Adrian. And, I think it's, go into it with humility and respect. And that will ultimately, I think, lead you down the right paths.
Good advice, and probably the safest approach as well.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay, so Cory and Adrian just finished 1 week ago, landed in New York City last night, right?
Yeah, less than 12 hours
Almost
ago.
this morning.
You guys look pretty good. Good. New York Stock Exchange, very first stop when you come back to the United States, I guess, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay, Adrian Ballinger, Cory Richards, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, viewers. We'll see you tomorrow.